Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I want to make this video to discuss the results for the confidence interval simulation. But before we get into that, some good news on the Couch Potato brand snack food versus Beyond Meat argument. They have settled their dispute. Couch Potato brand has agreed to drop the Beyond name from their flavors, and they've also agreed to fire all their marketing personnel. And in a surprise move, they've actually asked me to become head of marketing. And I of course, emphatically accepted. And as I've been saying all along, their marketing department is one of their strengths. They've had really great marketing structures, and I just hope to elevate that to the next level. So, but with that out of the way, good news is that Couch Potato Brands snacks will be back, helping me create these videos, sponsoring my videos, and starting with this one. So I asked you to create your 3 of your own confidence intervals based on a given population. And the idea was you were supposed to generate 3 random samples, independent random samples, and with each one of those samples, you created confidence intervals. And then you looked at your confidence intervals and you were able to determine if the confidence interval contained the parameter. Now, in reality, when we create a confidence interval, we don't have the ability to determine if our interval contains the parameter, because the whole point of constructing a confidence interval is to try to estimate the parameter. So if we don't know the parameter, then we don't know if our confidence interval contains it. But the idea here was to really show you what the 95% confidence level means, or in general, the C% confidence level. What does that mean? Well, in class, we learned that the way we should interpret it is that C% of all samples will produce an interval which contains the true parameter. Okay, well, in this case, that means 95% of all samples will produce an interval which contains the true parameter. All right, well, let's see the results. Okay, now what you're looking at here are all of the different confidence intervals that were generated from all of your random samples. Notice the incredible variability here. This is due to sampling variability, very reminiscent of the variability of flavors in Couch Potato brand snack foods. I recommend trying one of their 5 delicious flavors. But this variability here is due to the fact that every time you generate a random sample of, in this case, 9 people from the population, you're likely selecting a different group of 9 people than you did in your first sample, or than any of your partners did in any of their 3 samples, right? There are so many different ways of obtaining a group of 9 individuals from a population of size 98. So a ton of different confidence intervals. And you'll notice as I'm scrolling up and down here, some of them captured the parameter, some of them didn't. Okay. Now the idea of a confidence level is that 95% of these that we generated should capture the parameter. So let's see if our results worked out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a formula to count the number of yeses. I'm going to set up a formula to count the number of no's. And then in this column over here, I've already written a formula to calculate the proportion of yeses and the proportion of no's. So the idea is for this is really the important value here. Let me highlight this box, this proportion over here, because we're hoping that that's a 95. Let's see if it is. Equals count if. So I'm using a function, so just a little Excel side note, it's called count if, and this is a cool function. If you have a list of values and you want to count the number of yeses, this is the function for it. So we would do count if, then we'd highlight the range that we're interested in. And this range would be the entire column of yeses and nos. I will lock onto that column, and then I will scroll over to my criteria. And in this case, I want to count only the yeses. So I highlight the yes column, close parentheses. And in this case, we had 254 yeses. I'm going to copy this formula down. And there were 19 no's. And now when we look at the proportion, so look at this. Only 93% of these confidence intervals actually captured the parameter. Not exactly 95%, but it's pretty close. Now, why don't we have exactly 95%? Well, probably a couple of probably a few reasons, really. I think, first of all, I did notice that there were definitely some intervals that seemed a little off, and I didn't necessarily take all of them out or catch all of them. So there probably are a few human errors going on here. Secondly, let's look at the definition. It says C% of all samples will produce an interval which contains the true parameter. Now, yes, we have a ton of samples here, 273 total samples, but that is actually not all of the samples. So really, we just have a sample of samples. And so within that, there's also some kind of sampling variability. So we really shouldn't expect in this limited number of samples to get a to get exactly 95% of the intervals capturing the parameter. But with 93%, we're fairly close. And I'm confident that, no pun intended, by the way, that in the long run, if we did this over and over and over again, if I asked you to give me 3 more and we had, instead of almost 300 intervals, if we had close to 1,000, we would ultimately trend towards 95%. We'd get closer and closer and closer the more intervals we get. So this is more of like a long run proportion. But the idea is that, let me see, this number will tend towards 95%. And yeah, as the number of confidence intervals increases. Okay, so hopefully this was eye-opening. I think, probably many of you had an understanding of what this idea of a confidence level means, but hopefully this really cemented the idea. Basically, anytime you construct a confidence interval, we're not really 100% sure whether it contains the parameter or not, but what we can say is we are 95% confident because we know that 95% of all intervals will ultimately contain the parameter itself. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I hope this was worthwhile video. I hope all is well, and we will continue our discussions tomorrow. Take care. Bye.